All right. So it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar. We're delighted to have you join us as we introduce FlexDeploy 8. I'm marketing, so I can say this. We want to unleash your DevOps potential. And if we do that, we believe we can ignite your business success. A few housekeeping measures. Please place your questions in the Q&A. We have an esteemed team, and I'll introduce them in a minute, that will be monitoring the Q&A, and we'll also cover them at the end. We're using a technology called Milestone today. I've been using it a while. Presentation and video recording will be shared fairly quickly. It comes out quite quickly, so don't worry about getting recordings. We'll make sure you get video recordings. And then my final housekeeping measure is feel free to reach out either during this webinar or after this webinar if you feel you need to schedule or have a FlexDeploy demonstration either to you or some of your colleagues. So with that, a few introductions. I'm Ash Owen. I'm the senior marketing guy here at Flexagon. Some of you may have seen me on recent webinars. Joining me today, Joel Wenzel, our wizard of UI UX. The top right, he's going to be demonstrating FlexDeploy 8. And I think hopefully we'll blow you away with some of the things we've done. And then below, you'll probably be familiar with these two characters. Our leader in engineering, principal architect Chandresh, and of course our solution architect, who's probably known to all of you, Eric Jones. So this is the team.
Hello.
Hi guys, welcome. Is everybody ready on my side?
We're ready.
Yep.
All right, let's go. First slide, next gen UI UX. With the release of FlexDeploy 8, we have finalized a multi-year UI UX modernization initiative. And I want to say, firstly, huge thanks to you, our customers and partners, that have engaged with us on this modernization journey all the way back from 5.6. Good Lord. And we hope you are as excited as we are. Now we've got to the end, or not the end, because we're never done, of course, for the release of FlexDeploy 8. And for those that have been on some of the webinars that I've been doing recently, you may have noticed we were starting to use FlexDeploy 8 in those webinars. I will say our focus remains and will remain going forward on improving both the user experience and adding innovative features. And you can see here how in this UI UX journey, not only have we improved and advanced the user experience, but we've added considerable new capabilities. So let's get into it. FlexDeploy release highlights. Yes, it has been primarily about UI UX modernization, but it'd be remiss of me if I didn't say we'd also added considerable new capabilities. The FlexDeploy 8 delivers a new workflow designer that simplifies and modernizes the creation of workflow automation. And you'll see this in the demo. You can now store your workflows as YAML code. So in storing them as YAML code offers several advantages: configurability, version control, and automation. And of course, it's a very human readable format. And now we've got workflow level security permissions. So you can control and security over the deployment process. And these permissions ensure only authorized users can perform specific actions. And again, I think that's pretty fantastic. And then the query save, save, share, and subscribe. Let's make it easy for you, our users, to save, share, and subscribe to queries, because we know how valuable that is for enabling collaboration and audit purposes. And the UI UX extended not just to workflows, but custom project types. I think they were called file types in the old days. So another modernized user experience. And I put on the bottom here, schedule events. Yes, we did introduce it in a 7. Release. I can't remember the number. But scheduled events in FlexDeploy empower users to trigger user-defined actions at time intervals. And I think it's going to be pretty significant. The flexibility really of like Groovy scripts combined with FlexDeploy's model is going to enable you to accomplish various tasks. For example, sending out monthly reports on deployment history via email, just to give you an example. But I'm sure you'll come up with many more. So I'm going to entice you towards the demo in a couple of slides. So the workflows, a modernized UI UX. This is fantastic. I get very excited about this. You still got the create, drag and drop. You can now store the workflows as YAML code. If you're working with Groovy, Python, Shell, Batch, PowerShell, we now have syntax highlighting and variable assistance. Wow. So if you are developers, now you've got real coding assistance. And we've even added conditional logic, so you can show and hide fields within your workflows. We'll see this in the demo, but I'm super pumped because you know the power of workflows for business systems, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce is pretty powerful. The save, query, and share and subscription. This is all about collaboration and audit readiness. We know that many of you work with auditors, release managers, business users, and if you can share a view, share a report, it makes things so much easier. And now you can share the URLs and all the rest of it. So I think a tremendous improvement here. This will also be in the demo. And then the scheduled events I've already mentioned. I think I'll leave you with this. I think there's such a wide range of automation and customization possibilities. I'm kind of intrigued to what you, our customers and partners, can do with this kind of feature. So with that, let me hand over to Joel for the FlexDeploy 8 demo overview.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ash. Alrighty. So to start, I just want to mimic Ash's sentiments. This has been about a 3-year journey for us, this next gen UI, and really excited to share the concluding release of that with you guys here today. And there's a handful of features we're going to be going through. We have about a 20 to 30 minute demo. To start with here, we're going to be looking at workflows though, really the bread and butter of the 8.0 release here. And to start with, I'm on our workflow screen. And one of the first things that might jump out at you is the group and subgroup, really that folder structure that we had with workflows is gone. What we actually have now is just a flat list, just like we have with pipelines and users and really a lot of our other list screens. But fear not, subgroup and group kind of are still there, just with tags instead. So what we'll actually do for you existing customers, as you're migrating to 8.0, we'll convert those group and subgroups to tags for you. So you'll see those applied here once you finish migration. In addition to having the list screen here, we also, and this is actually true across all of our tables now at this point, we added a simple search just to make those a little bit easier rather than having to click on a specific column and search for it. You can just quickly type in the search box. For example, if I wanted to find build workflows, I can just search build. And again, that's across all of our tables at this point. And there's a few new actions that we allow on our workflow list screen here that we didn't allow previously. And I can see those just by right-clicking again to bring up the actions menu or by using our actions menu at the end here. And the two namely are copy workflow and delete workflow. And to start with, we're actually going to take a look at copy workflow. And there shouldn't be too many surprises here. We have copy with a lot of other entities in FlexDeploy, whether it's pipeline, project, releases. So up at the top, we have our new metadata, so our name, type, description. And then we can pick a version of our target workflow that we actually want to copy. So if, for example, your workflow here has multiple versions, we're not going to copy all of them. You're just going to pick one, and then we're going to keep that. And then a few other checkboxes down here for other config that we're going to bring along for the ride. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this guy. And you'll notice again, it brought over that individual version, which we can see here by default. And we're not going to get into the workflow details here just yet. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and show deleting of the workflow. And there are a few stipulations with deleting workflows. Again, this is a new feature, but so if the workflow is used by projects, for example, or it's been executed, you can't delete it. So it's really meant for those cases where you accidentally create something or you're just trying something for fun almost and you want to delete it afterwards. And there are a few additions, as Ash mentioned, to save queries, but we're actually going to circle back here towards the end. But for now, we're actually going to jump into one of our workflows here. And for the workflow details here, what I'm actually going to do is I'm kind of going to break this down into two sections. The first being, I'm going to go through all of our tabs here and talk about some of the new features. And then the second half, we're actually going to implement some of those changes so we can see those and how they actually would live in a real life scenario. And to start with, we're going to go in reverse order here just a little bit. We're going to start with the security tab. And I'm sure you can probably gather what this new security tab means is that workflows now have individual permissions if you opt into them, which means, so previously we just had global permissions for our workflows, which are defined here in our global permissions, and then those would apply to all workflows. What you have the option to do now is on each individual workflow, you can choose to override security and then pick your custom groups. And just note that you are fully overriding security here. You're not extending from the global permissions, you are completely changing them. So you can remove permissions as well as add here. And this is great, but typically the use case here is you probably want to update multiple workflows at the same time or assign the same security model to multiple workflows. So to handle that, if I jump back to my list screen actually, what we have here is under our table actions on the top right, we have bulk update permissions. And here we can select multiple workflows and then assign some actions, whether we're adding permissions, removing, or just hard setting them, and then pick the groups that we want to actually apply those permissions to. And in addition to that, it could be rather tedious to have to select the individual workflows here that you want to apply permissions to. For example, if you wanted to give all the workflows that have a specific tag a set of permissions. For example, I'm going to go ahead and search for demo tag here. There is only one, but you can imagine this would return multiple. And then there is a button right here that will basically select everything that you have filtered on the list behind you. So that is a nice way if you want to apply all of the same permissions to a given set of workflows. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add Java developers to read here. And note that I am just adding, so it isn't like I'm losing any permissions, I'm just adding Java developers. And with that, if I jump back to security, we can see this is now overridden, and indeed Java developers has been added to our read security. So really strong feature here for individual security. We've done this on a number of objects up until this point, whether it's target groups or environments, so on and so forth. Alrighty then, jumping on to properties. And there are two properties existing here, and we're going to use these in the second half of the workflow details demo here. But just to talk about some of the new features that we have on workflow properties. The first being, so our field data type, and this should be nothing new at this point. We've been doing this with all of our next-gen screens as we migrate them over. So the field data type, instead of selecting that Java type, whether it's string, long, Boolean, you're selecting those actual input elements just to make that a little bit more user-friendly. I'm happy to report, in addition to that, we've added some new options here. If I keep scrolling down, so we have this scripting section now. And here you can actually pick a custom language, not a custom language, but a language for your custom property. And when you do that, I'll just go ahead and pick shell for fun here. We actually get appropriate syntax highlighting. Should be back. And as well, if there are variables available in the given context of the property, those would show up as well. So for example, if you're using the shell plugin, you'll actually see all of those $f the environment code variables available. So you won't have to guess at those. Just going to cancel that real quick to get back to my original state here. And then the second item I wanted to highlight that's new with workflow properties here is hide when and disable when. And really what these are ways to conditionally hide or disable given workflow properties or inputs, whatever they happen to be, based on other fields. And we'll get into this a little bit more in the second half of the demo here. And jumping to the definition here. So this is really where you're going to be spending the majority of your time when you're editing workflows. So just to kind of run through the screen here, across the toolbar up the top, we have undo, redo capabilities now. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a copy here so we can see that. And actually, before I even demo that, I should have started with this. Half of you are probably going to jump for joy. The other half probably really won't know what's going on. But one of the biggest features that we've added is you can actually move steps that are already dropped in the workflow. So whether you're moving them out of steps or into steps or just around, rest assured you can do that. And since I've been doing that, we noticed that my edit redo, or undo redo, I'm sorry, is disabled here, or enabled. So all of that is there as well. Continuing along here, so we have our inputs and our variables. Not a whole lot new here. Again, inputs, as you might expect, we again have that field data type selection, as well as the hide when, disable when. And then jumping to source, as Ash mentioned, so all of our source is now stored as YAML. Previously, this was XML. Some of you may not have even noticed. You actually had to click on the source button in the UI to even see it, and you typically didn't need to unless you were maybe copying a workflow, but really shouldn't be needed anymore. But it is YAML now, and you can edit this on the fly in this editor if you wish to edit your workflow that way. And continuing on along, so our controls across the top here, we have simplified process of making a copy compared to workflows and pipelines. So it should be exactly the same at this point. This is a slight change from 7.0 in terms of pipelines. Actually jump there real quick. So in pipelines, those of you that are on 7.0, you may notice a little bit of a difference here, but just know that this is the same as workflows now, just so there is that consistency. Previously, the activate button was at the bottom down here. Let's go ahead and jump back to that workflow though. Alrighty, we have full screen as well. Certainly handy if you have those bigger workflows where you need a little bit more real estate as you're editing. And then in our three dots menu here, we have a nice outline. And it is a little funky about if you have if statements, just because there's multiple levels to the if. But if you do have long sequential workflows, this could be a lifesaver because you can quickly jump back and forth between your steps here. We also have zoom capabilities. Again, handy if you have those bigger workflows. And then comparing versions. And we'll actually look at this a little bit towards the second half here. But you can compare actual changes between your workflow versions at this point, similar to pipelines. And then all the way on the right over here, so we still have our workflow operations and plugin operations. Plugin operations is exactly the same as before, really nothing new there, apart from any new plugins that we've shipped with 8.0. But for workflow operations, we do have two new ones here, namely Run Groovy and Error Handler. And we're going to look at those in a little more detail here in the second half. And then finally, just to cover all of our bases here, we have workflow info, just the metadata for our workflow, so our name, our type. We can see references, so what projects are using our workflow, as well as any other child workflows or calling workflows that are calling it through like an invoke workflow step. Alrighty though, so now let's get into actually implementing some stuff. And the first thing that we want to do is we're actually going to make use of our error handler step. And what this is, for those Java developers out there, this is basically a try-catch for your workflow. So you can run a certain amount of steps, and should an error occur, then you can run some other steps to handle that error. And then you have the option to either throw that error again, so that way the workflow would still fail, or you can actually suppress it and then continue with more steps after the fact. So I'm just going to leave the defaults here. Try and drag my if into there. So now we've got an entire error handler around our if. And what we actually want to do is, should something fail right here, we want to send an email to somebody, which again, this does happen by default within FlexDeploy if you're subscribed to notifications, but just for demo purposes, we're gonna go ahead and send a manual email. And what we have in our if block, just to talk this through before we actually send our email. So we have this variable here, demo should override content. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to write a file, and we're going to save that to our artifact repository. And we're just going to use this demo file content variable or property. And just to save that real quick, these are the two properties that are defined. So you guys can see that. These are the two properties defined in our workflow properties here. And what we're going to do is our demo file content is going to be specified on the project. And should a project specify this content, it's going to write the file with that content. Otherwise, it's going to use some default content. And this checkbox is just going to be to indicate whether we want to use the default or the actual overridden content. So it's kind of convoluted, but just kind of follow along and just make use of the new steps here. So again, in our if block, we're checking that override flag. So if it is, then we're going to do create a file, and we're going to use that file content. Otherwise, we're going to be using or throwing a fault. So we should get into our error block if we don't set that value. And from there, we're actually going to send our email through our new run Groovy step. And this run Groovy step is really just similar to a custom step or gate within a pipeline. You just have an empty script here and all of your variables available, including all of our utility functions. So we have our FlexDeploy utility function that has all of the functions that we have, as well as email, which we're going to use for this guy. And we're not going to get real cute with it. We're just going to have a simple body and subject here. And we're actually going to use here we go, just an array of email addresses. Go ahead and send that to my personal one there. And with that, we actually should be able to see our email now should a project use this workflow and it doesn't have that flag set. And we have just the project in this case. Alrighty, so I have my demo project here, and this is actually set up to use that workflow. So we have demo workflow and then local. And if I look at properties, so we have our checkbox here, and I actually should have showed this on the workflow first. My apologies. But so we're actually going to leverage hide when and disable when for this logic here. And what we have here, so in hide when, we're basically checking that other override flag. And if it's false, so unchecked, then we're going to hide this demo file content field, which is why when we go to the project here, by default, we don't even see that option. But once we check that, now it's visible. Actually, we're going to start with this not set just so we can see our error. And let's go ahead and execute it. We can actually see here, and you'll notice that this didn't fail. And the reason it didn't fail is back in our workflow here. So on our error handler, this propagate error is set to false, which means it does error here, but then it runs our error steps. And because we're not propagating, the workflow is basically successful at this point. So had we had additional steps at the bottom of the workflow, those would have executed as well. But we do see in our steps here that we did execute our on error block. And in our run Groovy here, you see we also have the option to view logs. So we do have a custom logger available in the run Groovy operation. So you can write those custom logs. And then just to show over here, so I did receive an email with just the workflow body failed, which is what we expected there. Alrighty, and then the last thing we want to do is actually just write our default content if they don't have that option set, just so it doesn't fail. And to do that, we're going to use a few more new features, namely one here. So you can right-click each step to get to the edit of the step, as well as you can duplicate and insert steps after that. So if you want to just duplicate, which is actually what we're going to do here, we're going to duplicate, drag that over to the else, and just put some default content here. Disable Groovy, just say default content, and that should be just enough. And we'll go ahead and build this one more time. We can see here our if has already succeeded. We're in our create file. This should be rather quick here. And I must have forgot to check produce artifacts, but at the end of the day, we know that I worked there. Just to double check here. Yep. Alrighty, and then so the last thing here on workflows is, again, I mentioned the compare versions. So by default, it's going to show your current version on the right. So we can actually see changes as we've been incrementing these versions. So we can actually see in this 1.8 to 1.9, I actually did change our produces artifacts flag from false to true. And then as we go through our versions, we can see we have more and more subsequent changes, certainly. Alrighty, that concludes workflows. And from here, we're actually going to jump to saved queries. And we're actually going to stick on our workflow list page here just to make things a little bit easier to start with. So for those that don't know, the majority of our tables and lists at this point have this saved query option on the top right here. And what this allows you to do is basically save a set of filters or sorts or column ordering so you can quickly get back to it. And this has been there actually since 5.6, so there's really nothing new here. You can see as I'm just jumping through this, my displayed data is changing. But what is new is if you click the edit icon here, the edit option, there's two new options within this pop-up here. So we have the option to share saved queries. So we can make it global, which will share it with all FlexDeploy users, or we can share it with specific groups. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to share demo workflows here with our FD administrators group. Then I'm going to open a new incognito window here. I have this user 90 here that's in our FD administrators group. Now when I come to workflows as this other user, I don't have any of my own saved queries, but I do have this new section for shared with me. And I do have this demo workflows that was just shared by our administrator. And with that, you can't edit the query itself because I don't own it. The other user owns it, but you can select it and you get that view. And in addition to that, once it is shared with you, I'm going to jump to a different screen for this, so bear with me. I'm going to jump to environment state. Once a query is shared with you, you do have the option to subscribe to that query. And the admin owner, the query owner, has to set up the subscriptions first. And what subscriptions are basically just automated exports of the data in that saved query. And you have a couple of options, just like you do with most exports, where you have CSV or PDF format, as well as you can set up a cron expression, which I have this one just every day at noon. It's going to send this export out. And you can see I am subscribed to it. And just to show that, I'm not going to wait until noon. Obviously, we'll be here all day, but I'm just going to hit this test button at the bottom. And that should send an export right to my email address. And pop that out and bring that to the screen here. And from this email, there is a link right back to that query as well. You see here, it jumped to environment state once it loads with my default query applied. And it does have our CSV export here. And it is noteworthy as well. So we don't support subscriptions on all saved queries at this point. We do support them for all of the reports. But on our workflow list, you'll notice if I try and configure a subscription, we'll see that it's actually not available for this view. So this is just a work in progress. We're going to be converting these over as we go, just supporting more and more saved queries with subscriptions. But we do feel we did get the big ticket items first with this 8.0 release. Alrighty, on to our third section. So that concludes saved queries. And as Ash mentioned, scheduled events are actually something that released in, I believe, 7.03 or 7.003. But we do want to highlight it just a little bit here with our 8.0 release, just because it is a really powerful feature that we're excited about. And what scheduled event messages are here, scheduled events, are really a way where you can set up a cron expression again, or a schedule, to just run some custom Groovy script that you've defined. So in this particular example here, I have email open releases. And it's basically just grabbing all of the releases that have been there for a week, or open for a week, and then emailing the owner of the releases with that information. So just try this out here. Whoops. I should have 3 open releases here. And obviously the use cases here are really up to your imagination. I just kind of picked something at random here. But we can see we just have this first release is overdue. So a very simple email again, but really, again, it's up to your imagination. So there's certainly a lot of use cases there for scheduled events. And then the last one, so we have custom project types, which is our last section that we're going to talk about here. And to start with, just for those that don't know what project types are, if I select a package-based project here on a new project, a new field pops up for project type. And what this is, when you're selecting package-based, FlexDeploy is deploying individual files versus deploying, for example, a jar file that has a bunch of stuff within it. We're just deploying individual files. And when you select the project type, you're telling FlexDeploy basically what files can I expect, how should I be categorizing them, and what are the attributes and commands to actually build and deploy these files. And all of that metadata is managed in this project type screen here. For example, if I go to EBS, which is probably our most used package-based project type here. So these are all of the file types that EBS will basically categorize and then sort, so these can be deployed individually here. And if I click on one of these, for example, SQL scripts, or just scripts in general is fine. Each file type has a certain number of attributes, and these attributes really define how that build and deploy process happens. And all of these are customizable as well. So you can extend any of these attributes if you need to, for example, change the location that it's deployed to, the actual file path, you can override that or extend that here, so on and so forth. And none of that has actually changed apart from the new screen here, but what has changed with 8.0 here is you can actually create your own custom project types. And I actually have one here. It's just a custom file project type, and there's really nothing fancy about this. It's just directories and files. And each of these has, or I guess file here has file name and file type, and then directory just has directory name. And I actually have a project that's using that. My custom file project here. So if I go ahead and look at the file catalog. So I've already populated. I have my files here using that custom project type. And if I were to look at one of these files, we can see we have those attributes here. So we have our file name and our file type. And we can see file type has a drop down here. Just jumping back to project types real quickly. So file type here that you can see just as an example how it actually infers kind of what the file type default value should be. We're just looking at our file extension here and then setting our type, and then we provide some list data as well. So this is what defines the data on that dropdown. For example, here if I had other2 and save that. Just jump back to my custom project and go ahead and evaluate all. Actually, I think I need to discover. We can now see in our file type, we have another option for other2. So there is, again, like scheduled events, there's a lot of use cases here. I just picked something simple just to kind of get your guys' feet wet. But yeah, it's really up to your imagination what you want to do with these custom project types. And then lastly, I want to wrap things up with one final section here. And this is really meant more for the admins out there. But in our admin operations screen here, the first thing being is we've changed the layout just a little bit. And we used to have a drop down on the top left up here, but we've switched to tabs just to make things a little more visible. But we do have a new operation for view errors as well. And viewing errors, really what this is we have a lot of background processes running in FlexDeploy, things that may go unnoticed otherwise unless you're looking at the logs. So this is just a place where you can actually visualize those errors and see what's going on in the background of the application. And this is one of those places where we do have saved queries as well as subscription support for those. So as an admin, if you wanted to get a daily email of the errors that are happening in the system that day, you can certainly do that. And with that, that actually concludes our demo. Certainly not as long as previous webinars, but we still have a packed release here. Again, I only showed a handful of features. We do have a lot more. I encourage you all to check out release notes just to see everything that is shipping with 8.0 here. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Eric.
All right. Thanks, Joel. Let me just get my screen share going here. All right, Joel, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, I am.
All right. So I just wanted to spend just a few minutes here just reflecting on the entire transformation over the last 3 years. So we can certainly appreciate that it was not easy for you as existing customers, particularly if you've been taking on all of these major releases, right? We're going from an old user experience to a new user experience. So there's a lot of change that needs to be adopted over that time. So we certainly appreciate you hanging in there with us. I mean, myself, as someone that demos FlexDeploy to existing customers and prospective customers all the time, I certainly am appreciating that the transformation is now complete and we have that, consistent experience end to end. But just to reflect a little bit, along this journey, 5.7 did have, the start of the reports, but really in earnest, the transformation started in 6.0. And not going to cover everything, obviously. We've done that in previous webinars. Joel covered 8.0 today, but just to reflect on some of the kind of the anchor points over the last 3 years. And with 6.0, it was really a focus on the developer persona. And specifically, we went after the project configuration, all the configuration that goes with that, as well as the execution system. So introducing the global search, the different types of, kind of partitioning your projects, whether it's favorites, recently accessed, still organization within files or within folders. 6.0 also brought a brand new dashboard. So instead of a dashboard that's got some seeded counts of objects and some drill down capability to get to those objects, it's now a fully user customizable dashboard with a set of seeded metrics that you can drag and drop to build dashboards by persona to really get after the information that on one hand makes you more productive, but number two gives you the insights that you need to continuously improve or assess release readiness. 6.5, the anchor point was topology. So with that, it's obviously a new user experience, a lot of feedback from customers and partners that really, drove us this direction. Also, you would have saw that the connections to various tools in the tool chains used to be in topology. It's now centrally located in a newer integrations page within FlexDeploy, everything from source control, agile planning, service management, etc. And then the anchor point of 7.0 was the release and pipeline. So that was a very big lift for us. There's a lot of capability, as you know, between the release, pipeline configuration, as well as the execution into the insights that it provides. So that was probably our biggest release in this transformation. Just one more screenshot on the execution view, the release dashboard within the new transformation. And then last, we won't spend any time on this one. This is what Joel just demoed, but the anchor point certainly for 8.0 was around workflows and completing, a handful of smaller other items to really complete the transformation. So I just wanted to kind of take a look back and kind of appreciate where we were to where we are today. And then also to highlight if there's any customers out there who've been kind of holding back on upgrading because they didn't want to consume multiple points of change. Well, 8.0 is certainly a good target for you to look to upgrade soon, because now you can go through that change management once and kind of be done with it. As Ash mentioned, we're going to continue to innovate, obviously, but we would expect that the amount of change management as you consume new releases is certainly going to trend downward now that we're through this major transformation. All right, that's it for me. I can turn it back over to Ash to take any questions and kind of wrap the presentation.
All right, so let's go to questions. Let me just reshare. There it is. Oh, yeah, okay, there you go. Okay, you say my questions? Oops, went ahead. Stay on questions. Unfortunately, when I do that, I can't see the question and A panel. So can someone see if there are any questions in? I want to encourage people to put your questions in the Q&A. Let us know if you've got any questions. This is a great time to ask. We have the mind melt of FlexDeploy knowledge on the call. Please do let me invite you to put in your questions either on this release, on migration, upgrades, anything else you want to bring up on this call.
So there were a few questions in the chat that looks like Joel and Chandresh were answering, but I think we can kind of read through those just for the benefit of the group. One of the questions was, when upgrading to 8.0, will workflow tags automatically be added for existing workflows? And for that one, I think Joel mentioned that during the demo. Maybe it wasn't caught, but yes, if you had groups and subgroups that you had your workflows organized into, when you upgrade to 8, those groups and subgroups will be migrated as tags, and they'll be, flagged to your workflows. So you'll be able to filter by those tags. You won't have to recreate them.
Yeah, and there is maybe just one noteworthy item there, and that is, so at some point we introduced, when you create a workflow, rather than picking a group and a subgroup, we default those values to something like build or deploy. So if we do find those groups or subgroups, we don't convert those, just because there's likely hundreds, then they're somewhat meaningless. But if there are, groups and subgroups outside of those will be migrated to tag.
Great. The next question is, we are using FSM for other teams, but does it offer partial deployments? We have to take all the values and value sets created in Dev and then migrate to other environments. Is there a way to customize the FSM plugin so that it selects certain values from a value set? Chandresh should answer that. Maybe you could do that live here, Chandresh.
Sure, yeah. So the FSM plugin supports filtering concept, which is through an object type called setup task. So it would apply to not just value set, but any other setup task that you have. So you can configure the filter in addition to export. So there's an extension to the Oracle APIs where you can remove or kind of configure what you really want to move of the data you have. So that's certainly possible.
All right, and then the other one was just a comment on wanting to see basically the FSM support for that FlexDeploy has. So certainly, as we mentioned at the beginning, reach out and we can have a one-on-one demo and a discussion around Oracle Fusion. We'd be happy to do that. So
one other thing Eric, one other thing just worth pointing out and re-emphasizing, for those that haven't, I would highly recommend reading through the release notes. Not only do we describe the new capabilities, the UI, UX, but more importantly, the plugin updates that are included in every release are also listed there. So I just want to emphasize that. That includes FSM and others. Sorry, Eric.
A couple more questions here. Am I correct in seeing support to deploy changes for Oracle Apex via FlexDeploy? Is this a new feature supported? We are running on an older version of FlexDeploy today. So FlexDeploy has long had support for Oracle Apex. I don't remember just how long ago that came out, but it's been at least a couple of years, probably longer. So we've got some information on the website and we have a tutorial for Apex, but also you can just reach out to Ash or myself and we can set up a demo to show you the support for Apex. It's a pretty cool solution. There's a couple of models. One is more traditional where you can build and deploy your application, but there's also a package-based model. So for large teams, you can break it down into individual pages and shared components, assemble them into packages, and deploy a subset of the application. Another question, can you please give an example of the benefits of project type customization feature?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, if you would, Chandresh.
So yeah, it's absolutely limitless. Can't say enough about it. So there is a whole set of plugins that we have always had. For example, Shell, Groovy, Python, Jython, Windows, PowerShell, and they support a very generic scripting operations, and they work on a individual file level, like it would like an EBS plugin or Salesforce plugin would work on an individual file. So let's say I'm just taking an example of Informatica, because that has come up in the past, but Informatica has different object types like workflows, projects even. I may be mispronouncing or mischaracterizing some of the names, but they are exported as XML files. So you can have a build deploy workflow using Shell, Jython, Python, Groovy, anything, and have a custom project type created, let's say Informatica, with object types called workflows and projects. Those are Informatica components. You can export them or get them from source control and deploy them. So you can literally make your own very rich solution leveraging the package-based approach. So it's just one example. You could do that for, let's say, WebLogic configurations or other middleware configurations where you have a piece of artifact or configuration that you want to individually deploy. So it gives you a basically shell plugin on steroids kind of thing. You can just about do anything that you would have otherwise done at a larger artifact level, now at an individual file level. If that helps.
All right, thanks, Chandresh. One more question here. Is it possible to demo migrating a workflow from test environment to, say, UAT environment? Is it export of the YAML file and import to some other mechanism? Joel, can you take that one?
Yeah, so I don't know if I'll demo it exactly, but it is like you suggest. I mean, you can just basically copy the YAML and then go to your other workflow and just paste it, and then it will just take effect immediately. So that is always an option. I did highlight in my answer as well, though. So we do have something in the pipeline for actually making this FlexDeploy to FlexDeploy migration with configurations more streamlined. So you can look for that in future releases. But yeah, for now, it would just be copy and paste of the YAML.
All right. Thanks, Joel. Another question came in here. Does FlexDeploy 8 have any support for OutSystems CI/CD? So I'm not familiar with that, Chandresh. I don't know if you are, or Ash. I mean, I think the short answer is no native direct support.
Yeah, there's no native direct support for now, yeah, go on, Chandresh.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'll say. So what I was just talking about, custom project type, might be applicable depending on what the artifacts you want to manage. Another option would be to kind of reach out to get some services engagement set up so we can look into it and quickly help you, get it implemented. But it is not natively supported. That's the answer today. But it's 100% possible to look into the options and implement them.
All right, thank you. And then there was a similar question, and I think it's a similar answer. Does FlexDeploy 8 version have any support for Databricks? So I think the answer is the same. It's not natively, but as you know, it's a very open and extensible platform. So if there's APIs available, it should be possible to create the workflows and orchestrate a process. And again, if that's beyond what you think you can tackle by yourself, we'd be certainly happy to put together a professional services package to help with that. So that's the last question that I see in the chat here. So we got about 10 minutes left. Maybe just kind of making this up on the fly, but I think I'm going to
And here's a really quick one, Eric, and I don't know, can we just talk briefly about what is planned for the future of FlexDeploy?
Yeah, what I was thinking on that is, Chandresh, you can say a few words, but I think for maybe the April FDUG, we could spend a little bit of time in there, talking about the roadmap of what's coming in the future in a more holistic fashion. But Chandresh, go ahead and say a few words.
Sure, yeah. So we're looking at a few different things on a near-term basis, but absolutely anything on your mind, on your roadmap that you want to influence our roadmap, most definitely reach out to any of us. The configuration export import is an option that we're working on that Joel just mentioned about workflows and projects. And a lot of times customers kind of create their setup in the stage environment, move it to their production environment. So that's one feature. We're looking at a lot of use cases in terms of the Git, even more richer Git integration. That comes out from some of the application that we are supporting, Salesforce, even Apex, OIC. So the use cases around even more tighter integrations where we are looking at creating branches, pull requests, things like that. So there is significant development that will happen there. We are also reviewing some of the requests that we have got from rollback and how to roll back effectively, and that's still under review. Another aspect is we always focus on enterprise integration. So our focus is around application integration. So the biggest one have been EBS, SaaS, Salesforce, even SAP now. So there may be a few more things added there. Definitely advancements in each would also be there. We're also looking at few small things that have come from some of you where you like specific things in the old UI and wanted that resurrected. So there are few of those things we have been working on prioritizing and kind of re-implementing them, mainly because some of the customers have expressed interest in some of the older UX mechanisms. So I won't go into details of those, but there are a few things coming from your request. But anything in your mind, definitely just reach out, and we're happy to reshuffle things depending on the requests.
Yeah, feedback, whether positive or negative, certainly goes a long way for us. I mean, we really do take it into serious consideration, so certainly feel free.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, I think there's just the one final slide, and that is the next FlexDeploy user group on the April 10th. And this is a tremendous opportunity. I want to invite attendees. It'll be an open office format. Come with your questions, ideas, best practices. We're going to have an open space to talk and connect. And of course, as we just heard, we can also share more details on near-term and longer-term roadmap ideas. So that's on April the 10th. So team, anything else? Any other outstanding questions? Any other concerns that we need to bring up now?
Not seeing anything else in the chat, but I'm going to put Joel and Chandresh on the spot live here. Joel, looking back over the last 3 years of the transformation, if you were to pick one feature, what's your favorite?
One feature or one screen? If I had to pick like a screen, I actually do think workflows, even though I'm somewhat biased here just because we just did it. But I think workflows, there's so many good things within workflows that have been added, particularly in the editor itself, that I would have to say workflows. If I had to pick a specific feature, I mean, the drag and drop in and out of the steps is pretty high up there, but probably I really like the zoom actually for whatever reason. It's very minor, but something like that. That little stuff just jumps out at me. I'd probably pick.
How about you, Chandrash?
Yeah, hard to pick one thing, but I mean, if you're asking, I would say global search. The reason I bring that up also is whoever's has joined today and listening to me right now, I think that's the way of the modern web. You hit / and you look for, where do you want to go instead of going through the menu and finding things. And even though we have very cool things that can get you where you want to go, I think global search should be the center of how you want to get wherever you want to go there. Recents are there, favorites are there. So I think that's my favorite feature, and I hope everyone kind of gets after that.
Yeah, I'm changing my answer too. I forgot there's so many. I just forgot about what's all there, but that one is really good.
Yeah, I think for me, global search is definitely right up there, but I think just the ease of navigation and the productivity that it brings, pairing that with, the productivity features and the different editors, whether it's Groovy, Shell, and just making it easy to be productive without context switching across different areas. I think that floats to the top for me.
Yeah, that's also really good. Code editor is up there for me too.
Well, so much to look forward to in FlexDeploy 8.
For sure.
Okay, I think is this a wrap? I want to thank everybody for attending. I look forward to seeing, hopefully, some of you at the FlexDeploy user group. We hope this has been helpful. So please feel free to provide feedback. I'd like to thank Joel for the demonstration, Eric and Chandrash for the wonderful answers, and you for your wonderful questions. So, let's move forward together and hopefully make a big difference for you, your customers, your partners in the organizations that you serve. So thanks very much for attending today. Appreciate it.